Warbles on a lot to Sister Sunshine TV in response to her clip, switching off one's brain is not an option. And I'm going to do a bit of a book review of, well, it's the Book of God theories that I subscribe to. It's called the OAHSPE. Okay, sister, in your video you've basically got hung up again on the idea of hell and the descriptions of hell that were given to the Jews 3,500 years ago and the Christians 2,000 years ago and the Muslims 1,400 years ago. And, you know, well, okay, they were fairly primitive people. It was a primitive time. It's a bit infantile, even looking at it now and making allowances for the fact that a lot of politics and military mentality has crept into those religions. But to talk about religion, I really probably should outline my own personal journey along the track. I was born in a house where my parents were Presbyterians. It was a second marriage. Dad's first wife was a Jew, and he'd raised his first family with no religion in the house. So when I was 6 and my mother had been taking me to Presbyterian Sunday school, the old man said, look, you don't have to go if you don't want to. So I was excused from Sunday school and I was allowed to play around in the shed and build things. When I was 11, I got sent to Catholic boarding school, and the first one was at De La Salle College, and they allowed me to sit in on the religious knowledge lessons, but I did not have to participate. I then went back to a government state high school for 6 months and off to another Catholic boarding school. That one was run by the Missionaries of the Sacred Heart, and they required that I did participate in religious knowledge lessons. So 6 years at 2 Catholic boarding schools for a Presbyterian who had been excused from Sunday school. I came out of that a functioning atheist with very little desire to know anything about religion. But then I went nursing, and nursing's one of those jobs where you fill in the census form and it says what business is your employer engaged in, and it's cure the sick, comfort the dying and raise the dead. So 12 times I had patients that died and I wound up laying them out. I witnessed 12 births in a labour ward while doing my obstetrics secondment, and I was charge nurse of the Vegetable Creek Hospital and came to the conclusion that there's a big difference between holding the hand of somebody who's alive, nearly dead from Alzheimer's, they might even be in Cheyne-Stokes respirations, and coming back half an hour after they've died to lay them out and holding their hand, and you can feel the absence of the soul. It's a personal observation, and if you haven't had much to do with corpses or births, then you probably won't know what I'm talking about. Maybe you'll accept my authority on it. Maybe you should just go and volunteer for some work as a nurse's aide. But anyway, while I was working as charge nurse at the Veggie Creek Hospital, I was renting a farmhouse, 1,500 acres, 5 miles out of town, 1 mile from the nearest neighbour. And a Hare Krishna told me that eating meat was a bad idea, and I counted that I was raised a hunt and shoot and fish and meat eater, and anyway I bought my meat from the butchers. And the Hare Krishna said, yeah, that makes it worse. You're spreading the bad karma. You're paying the butcher to do your dirty work. So for 2 years I shot all the meat that I ate, and I was in the finish apologising to rabbit carcasses as I was skinning them. And the last kangaroo that I shot, I couldn't make myself eat the tail and cooked it up into kangaroo tail soup. And therefore I gave up eating meat. I was only killing the things for the taste and the grease. It made me feel bad, so therefore I stopped. And about a fortnight later I was courting the then girlfriend, and she made the comment that she was going to pray for me. And I said, oh yes, but to pray you have to be a faithist. And to be a faithist you have to suspend reason, and I'm a reasonable man. So until I find a reasonable faith, I think I'll remain a scientist. Thank you very much. She smiled at me, and I got in the car and I went for a drive and visited a friend, and the friend had a mate visiting, and the mate had a book, remarkable book. It looked interesting, and when I examined it, it seemed to be midrash. It's an Aramaic word that means religious science fiction. And I thought, beauty, I'm going to have fun with this. So I borrowed the book and I took it home, expecting to be able to make pages of notes on all the garbage and mistakes that was obviously going to be in it, a 987-page Book of God theories. You know, it's got to be either religious science fiction or exactly what it says it is. And 3 days later, and I hadn't found any mistakes. I decided to have a look in the index and see what it had to say about the Creator. And it led me on a bit of a circular logic track, but how many God theories have got an index, let alone a glossary of unusual words? And the circular track it led me on was, what properties does the Creator have? What can the Creator do that no other entity can do? And I come to the conclusion that the Creator can make life. It can create life. And then it asks the question, what has those properties? What can make life? And the answer is life can make life. And the Creator, in my view, is the collective conscious awareness of all the life on all the planets in the universe. Wherever there's life, that's part of the Creator. And with that realisation, I walked outside and I looked at the blades of grass on the ground and the ironbark tree across the other side of the clearing. And I looked up at the sky and down at the hills, and the next thing I knew I was on my knees on the ground and I was in tears, and I felt like I'd been hit by a bolt of lightning, and it was pure love. I picked myself up and walked inside and looked at the 9 guns hanging on the wall and loaded them in the car and drove off to the nearest gun shop and sold the bloody lot of them, because I wasn't going to need them anymore, was I? I'd had the confirmation. I'd run into a God theory that wasn't bullshit. And I'm now going to give you a little bit of a book review. This is a 1970s vintage, what they call a Green OAHSPE. And yeah, it's got gold leaf on its leather binding. You tend to find these in a second-hand or a theosophical bookshop. This one came from the Adyar bookshop in Sydney. First published in 1882. And it claims to be a new Bible in the words of Jehovah and his angel ambassadors, a sacred history of the dominions of the higher and lower heavens of the earth for the past 24,000 years, together with a synopsis of the cosmogony of the universe, the creation of the planets, the creation of man, the unseen worlds, the labour and glory of gods and goddesses in the Etherian heavens, with the new commandments of Jehovah to man of the present day, with revelations from the second resurrection, formed in words in the 33rd year of the Cosmon era. You can see why I thought this was religious science fiction. But it comes with an editor's preface dating to 1882. And as I said, it's got a glossary of strange words used in this book. For example, angel, a spirit man. The word spirit does not define whether man or animal, but is often erroneously used instead of angel. Or for example, beast. The animal man, the earthly part of man, anything that is enforced as a religion. Corpore, whatever has length, breadth and thickness and is tangible to sight, hearing and feeling, the extreme opposite condition from ether or solution or rarefaction. Corporean, a man of the earth, any man, all men, in contradistinction from an angel, who is a man of S, a spirit. Chaotix, deranged angels, such as are killed in war or in anger. Christ or Christ, wisdom, knowledge, education. After the false god Louis Among falsely took this name, it became synonymous with warrior. Christians or Christians, a brotherhood of warriors. They were named Christians in derision by the Hebrews. One who rushes into a multitude of rioters and with a sword enforces peace is a true Christian. A people whose faith is in arms and standing armies. The following words are synonymous: Brahma, Buddha, Christ, Christ, Baal, Ashtaroth, Dagon, Vishnu, Ashdod, knowledge, wisdom, Krishna, light, Po, Tayin, Wa, Manito, and in fact a score of others. Crucify, to melt, to test by fire, to test by binding. The original form of testing a suis or sargis medium was by binding him on a wheel. It kind of blew me away when I first saw it. As did this, Druck, a low mortal, one who desires no spiritual light, one who cannot understand spiritually, an evil man, a warrior. Druge, Druge applies to an angel the same as Druck to a mortal, a low, dark, evil, dangerous. Faith, a convinced belief, a condition of mind fully satisfied, next to actual knowledge. We have faith the sun will rise tomorrow morning, but the knowledge cannot be actual until after sunrise. Faithist, one who has faith in Jehovah being over all and within all to a wise and definite purpose. One who has not faith in anything but Jehovah. One who endeavours to make themselves in unison with Jehovah by doing good unto others and in striving to put away self-gratification. A non-resistant, the opposite from Ousian. You can get bogged down for days just looking at the glossary. And it's a big, fat, thick style of a book. After the glossary, you've got a kind of a new version of Genesis, complete with diagrams showing the first, second and third heavens or resurrections of the earth. And the only representation of the solar system that I've ever seen outside the Aboriginal rainbow serpent, where you've got the sun as the head of the serpent and the planets forming the body of the serpent, and it swims across space. And every 3,000 years, according to this book, there's a period of light. And during these periods of light, that's when the spirits of the dead are able to speak to the living humans, and that's when the God in charge of the earth basically gets replaced by a whole new God. Interesting idea, isn't it? And the story is that the Cosmon era began in 1848 when we got a new God, and therefore we got a new revelation. Not until you get to page 773 that you get to the Book of Judgment, and you have the judgment upon the Brahmins, the Buddhists, the Christians, the Mohammedans, the Confucians, the Jews, and all the other peoples of earth in the words of God. Page 780, we have God's judgment of the Jews. 796, God decreeth against infidelity. Page 798, God judgeth Uz, commonly called the world's people. Page 800, God judgeth the ascetic. God said, there are such as shut themselves up in colleges, convents and nunneries, and such as retire to the forests, devoting their lives to prayers, confessions and rites and ceremonies, being most systematic in routine, and in being shut away from the Ousians. And they allot certain ones as leaders and overseers, making themselves inquisitors over one another, in the hope of purifying their thoughts and aspirations, constantly trapping one another, shortness, and then submitting to petty punishment and inflictions, hoping thereby to check evil thoughts, words and actions. Judgment is rendered against all such people, be they mortals or angels. For these are the methods of the imprisonment of mind. All such mortals are preparing themselves for the bondage of the Drujars on their entrance into the S-world. All such people are the manifestation of darkness instead of light. Jehovah created man with a capacity for developing talent to do good unto others. They call their initiations sacred, but I declare unto thee they are a blasphemy against Jehovah. They are as a snare for the imprisonment of the mind and the soul. And after death, these people are prevented by their Drugian masters from entering the heavenly places of resurrection, becoming instead slaves in the S-world to pursue such calling and practice as they may be put upon them. We also have God's judgment of the man of promise. You know, somebody like me who says, I'll do good things one day. Well, yeah, judgment's against people like me. God judgeth against war. All war. Now I declare unto thee there are angels lower than the first resurrection, being incapacitated from various causes, from knowing who they are, whence they came, and whither they are going. Yea, many of them know not the words of speech, nor signs, nor tokens, but are as destitute of knowledge as young babes. Many of them died in infancy, some of them were killed by abortion, some of them were idiots, and some of them deranged. Judgment is rendered against all nations and peoples on the earth for this great darkness, these early deaths, and because these angels are thus bound to mortals and cannot go away from them until such time as mortals die, mortals are responsible and bound to train them up by examples of righteousness and good works. Judgment is rendered against every nation and all the people in the world who carry on war or who are accessory to war, whereby any man created alive by Jehovah is slain in defence of any king or other ruler, or in defence of any country or government in all the world. And this is the bondage I put upon all such as not obey my judgments and conform thereto. They shall not rise above the first resurrection of the earth, until warfare ends upon the earth.